Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, I'm going to tell you why this week's matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers is the biggest game for the Eagles since Super Bowl 59.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Eagles-Chargers this Monday night. It's the biggest game for the Eagles since the Super Bowl in 2024. This team is at a crossroads, and this game to me really decides what the story of the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles is going to be. There are two options, and I see it pretty black and white with this game. I didn't with the Bears matchup. I didn't with the collapse in Dallas, but this game, depending on how it goes, there's a middle ground. I guess you could lose close, and if things kind of look fixed, but it's against a good Chargers team, and let's say you just lose on a last-second field goal, okay, maybe it's not black and white. But for me, I don't see that scenario happening. I think you either win this game or you lose in kind of convincing fashion. I think those are really the two options that would make me put a label on this season already. I think this team is at a crossroads. You can either look at the opportunity you have across the NFL. The Los Angeles Rams yesterday lost to the Carolina Panthers, so the Eagles still have the 1 seed in their sights. They're still only a game back with the head-to-head tiebreaker on the Rams. Of course, Chicago now jumped the Rams for the 1 seed, but I still feel like the Bears have a couple losses in them still this season, and they could drop down the standings in the NFC. Now, if Chicago holds on, there's nothing the Eagles can do at this point, because they have the head-to-head over Philadelphia. But the Eagles have the head-to-head on the Rams, who I think are the better, more consistent team in the conference. So they can see, oh, look at that. Carolina just handed you an absolute gift. You can see, I almost hope they watched football on Sunday to see how sloppy the rest of the NFL also is, where the Detroit Lions, after being the 1 seed last year, making the NFC title the year before, probably aren't going to make the playoffs this year. The Green Bay Packers have lost to the Cleveland Browns and the Carolina Panthers. The Chiefs and the Ravens are not in the postseason. The Buffalo Bills got a win yesterday, but they're kind of hanging on by a thread right now in the wild card standings. Indianapolis is completely collapsing. You could see all of that and just completely embrace a just win mentality that this season, this is what the NFL is. We're going to lean into it, bank on our experience in the playoffs, and say we can beat any of these football teams because we already have this year when things weren't perfect. So they could do that and embrace not being perfect and just win, or they can be completely miserable because it's not up to the standard that they're normally used to, and they can completely just give up for the second time in 3 seasons, and they can face a historic collapse. Like, yeah, again, I guess they could lose it close and look good against the Chargers, and that could be promising. But if they lose 3 straight, to me, that tells me that these issues are insurmountable. And I don't see a scenario where, if they're just in their heads and they're collapsing, I don't think this game is going to be close. So I see this one as pretty black and white on Monday Night Football against the Chargers, where they either fix this thing like they have the last 2 times they faced a collapse, when they were losing 2 straight this year to the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants. That could have completely derailed this season, and they didn't let it happen. They ripped off a 4-game win streak last year when they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in dramatic fashion and were 2-2. And during the bye week, everybody, including me, was calling for Nick Sirianni's job. They have been able to pass the last 2 tests that pose the question, hey, you going to collapse again? Hey, is this 2023 all over again? Can they pass it a third time? This time, it looks the closest to 2023 since we were dealing with that historically bad regression from the Philadelphia Eagles. So this team is at a crossroads. And look, if they lose in dysfunctioning fashion on Monday night, if they do suffer a second historic collapse in 3 years, even after an all-time great Super Bowl win last year, to me, that shows like there are some real root issues with this brass within the core of this organization that it would just be completely unacceptable and shocking for this team to do that twice. Like, considering the position, just think about it. If they do that after, in 2023, they were 10-1. And if they do that again this year, being 8-2, nobody else in the NFL does that. Like, sure, other teams have losing streaks. Other teams have funks that they're in. But a team to completely unravel and fall apart when you're at the top of the league, you have all of this talent, you have all of this experience in these kind of moments, it'd be like something I have never seen in my entire life. Covering this football team, covering this league, watching this sport for 28 years. So there is a ton of pressure on this football team on Monday night to just look like you're not giving up, that you're not unraveling, that you're not completely inept on one side of the football. That was the problem against Chicago compared to Dallas. Like, Dallas, yeah, you choked that game away in the second half, and for another half, you could not move the football, which has been the theme all season on offense. But against Chicago, you looked dead in the water pretty much the entire game, outside of 2 drives that were given to you by defensive turnovers, or the defense hanging on in the red zone. And one of those drives, the Eagles offense had a turnover. So that's the concerning part, is this game, they finally started to look like the end of 2023, where it was the entire game. They went from one of the best teams in football all year long to probably the worst team in football. And if I'm Jeffery Lurie, if that happens, I do not know what to think, because that would be the most confusing 4-year run, if you include the Super Bowl 57 run, that I've ever witnessed. Like, how do you evaluate Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts and this organization from top to bottom? Like, so often, and I hope we don't get to this point, that's why this game is so crucial, but if you get to that point and you've lost 3 straight and you're 8-5, and suddenly Dallas could catch you for the division, you could go from 8-2 in the 1 seed to maybe not making the playoffs, or like in 2023, being a road wildcard team that doesn't get a home playoff game. To go from a team that so often overcomes adversity, gets to championships, wins championships, and yet at the same time so often you historically collapse in season, it would be shocking, but also just so confusing, like what to think of that football team. Because on one end, it's like, yeah, you know this team can win consistently. They've made the playoffs every year in the Sirianni Hurts era. They've been to 2 Super Bowls. They should have won both. They got a ring last year as a top 5 NFL team, in my opinion, of all time. But then, it's not acceptable, even with that being said, to have a season unravel in the fashion that it could 2 of the last 3 years, even if a historic championship is sandwiched in between that. So real change would have to come. And I'm not saying trade away Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying even fire Nick Sirianni, but you absolutely would have to force Sirianni to move on from Kevin Patullo. You would have to make some substantial changes, I think, on offense. Like, you're going to have to draft an offensive lineman really early and bring in new concepts, new ideas, bring in a coach from outside of the organization. And then the leash for Nick Sirianni, every extension of that leash that he earned by winning a championship, by historically collapsing again, and where he's outright admitting at press conferences that they don't have the answers. Like, he's like, I wish I could tell you what's wrong. To me, that's more damning to Sirianni and this coaching staff than it helps them. And so for me, like, that wouldn't make him fired after this year, but suddenly 2026 is almost like a do or die season for a coach that's been to 2 Super Bowls and won a championship a year ago. So that's what, to me, is on the line against the Chargers, because if you lose and it's 3 straight losses, I don't think this team is coming back from that. Even though they play the Raiders still and they play the Commanders twice, and then they have that Bills matchup, which is going to be tough going late in December to Buffalo, New York. Trust me, I live in Buffalo, New York. The weather is not going to be great in that environment. So that'll be a tough one. But 3 of your last 4 games are extremely winnable. Even with that being said, if you lose this week on Monday Night Football, especially with Justin Herbert banged up, like he might not even play. It could be Trey Lance. This would be like last year losing to Drew Lock and the Seahawks, where even if it's close, I think they would unravel. So the season is on the line Monday Night Football next week, and it's the most important game of the season since Super Bowl 59 last year. It's the most important game since then. This is a crossroads, and we'll see if the Eagles have learned from their past experiences. If they're going to make sure they don't collapse, though, they need so much more from Jalen Hurts, and we'll get into it coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you today by Gametime. Gametime is, to me, the best way to get tickets. I was just at Eagles Bears on Black Friday, saw great tickets through Gametime right at the 50-yard line. And look, the World Cup is actually coming back to North America for the first time since 1994 with 48 teams for the first time ever. It's going to be massive. But let's be honest, like getting tickets to the NFL, to the World Cup, that's the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track prices dropping in real time, getting alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment that they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, have your tickets loaded in minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. The seat view feature is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. Prices include fees up front, which I love. No last-second surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets today. Every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. The Eagles at 8-4, facing an imminent, like must-win situation on Monday night against the Los Angeles Chargers, and maybe it's good for them to get out of Philadelphia for this one. I was at the game on Friday at the Link, and Eagles fans were kind of getting shredded on national social media, national football Twitter, for booing the Eagles at 8-3 early in the first quarter after winning a Super Bowl. You have 2 Super Bowl wins in under a decade and 3 championship appearances. Like, yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for as an Eagles fan, but I totally agree with them getting booed. Like, it's unacceptable. The Eagles have a lower success rate right now than the New York Jets, who have had Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor as their quarterbacks this year, and the New Orleans Saints. Like, 2 of the worst teams in football that are in complete rebuild mode have better success rates than the Eagles. This year's Eagles offense has a lower success rate than the 2020 Eagles and the 2015 Eagles. The Sam Bradford, DeMarco Murray, Miles Austin unit, the 2020 historic regression from Carson Wentz, those offenses were statistically, at least speaking, more efficient than this year's offense. So I think they deserve to get booed. But man, I will tell you, the pressure, the tension in that stadium was real. You could feel it from the top of the stadium. You could probably feel it from on the field as well. I think it'll be good for this team to get to the West Coast. This team is really good normally playing on the road, especially indoors. Jalen Hurts is a much better player indoors. I don't think, after Thanksgiving, when the weather gets cold, there aren't a lot of games that Jalen Hurts has really just thrown the doors off of a defense. And I'm not giving him an excuse for why he hasn't played consistent enough football this year. But I do think getting into LA against the Chargers, a banged up Justin Herbert, this could be the get right game. And like I said in segment 1, if it's not going to be now, I don't think it's going to happen this year. And man, what a long offseason that will bring up for us if that's the case. But hopefully they don't collapse. Hopefully they pass another test when a collapse is facing them. It's right in their mug. Jalen Hurts, though, is going to have to be so much better if they want to avoid that. He's going to have to be much more consistent. And I think they need like the 2023 version of Jalen back early in the year when the defense was so inept and the run game was kind of inconsistent with DeAndre Swift. Jalen Hurts carried that football team. Even though he was throwing interceptions, they were 10-1 because of the passing game. And so if they want to avoid this collapse, they need more from him. And I kind of need that first half of 2023 fearless Jalen Hurts. Even if it leads to some more turnovers, I think this defense can handle that. As long as it's not late in the fourth quarter, which has been the case with the turnovers the last 2 games. They've been very untimely turnovers. But if he throws a pick in the first quarter because he tried something with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, I can live with that. This team can't turn the ball over, but they need to score more points. Like, that's the biggest issue right now with this offense is that, yeah, the turnovers have killed them in close games back-to-back weeks in the fourth quarter. But if this team scored more than 1 touchdown a game, it feels like, those turnovers wouldn't be so detrimental. So they need to score more points. They need to produce more yards. And I don't think Jalen Hurts is a top 3 issue on this team right now. And I've come to accept kind of who he is with his elite traits and his limitations. I want him as the franchise quarterback regardless, because when it works, you compete for championships and you win championships. But with all that being said, I'm not going to lie. I am a bit disappointed that this year Jalen didn't take another step. I really did think, and again, he's had some really big time moments. I mean, that Vikings game, the Giants game, that back-to-back stretch started to put him kind of in the MVP conversation. He has had some incredible halves of football. Like that comeback against the Rams was unbelievable. The first half against Tampa Bay, he looked like Super Bowl 59, Super Bowl 57 Jalen Hurts. The first half against the Denver Broncos against a really good defense, he dominated. Last week against the Dallas Cowboys, the first half, that was some of the best football that I've seen Jalen Hurts play all year. But the problem is he has not been able to sustain that level of play all year. And sure, the offensive line's been a problem. The play calling has been a problem. But I really did think after Super Bowl 59, there was another level to his game. There was another evolution coming in Jalen's game that would be able to elevate a little bit more than we've seen. Now, again, I'm not saying he is the reason that they're 8-4 right now. And he has elevated this team at times this year. But at the same time, like, he has been as inconsistent as he has been in recent years as a pocket passer, if not more inconsistent. And I thought more was coming. Like, he was so surgical in the pocket against Kansas City, and he figured out the blitz. And a team finally took away Saquon Barkley, and he passed that test. They made him throw to win, and he did it. So for me, that told me, like, maybe, and he had a great training camp, a great summer, it sounded like. I thought this year he was taking another step. And that doesn't mean I want him gone, that I don't want him to be the franchise quarterback. I've accepted who Jalen is as a player for years now, but I thought more was coming. And I think more needs to come still this year if they want to compete for the 1 seed still, the 2 seed, and fight off the Dallas Cowboys for the division win. Like, the Cowboys are only a game and a half back. If they go in there and beat the Detroit Lions, Dallas is a problem, and they're coming. So this is one of those games that, yeah, even if Jalen hasn't taken another step this year, you should be able to ask your franchise quarterback that's won a Super Bowl and has been to 2 in the last 3 seasons to sometimes overcome, a lot of issues with this team that's making it difficult on him. But I will say with Jalen, too, like, some of it is on him as well. I saw a report by 2 different Eagles reporters that Jalen has not wanted designed runs this year as often called in the playbook as previous years because he's gotten injured as a running quarterback pretty much every season, which I can understand. But like, Jalen, you are not playing consistent enough football in the pocket right now to not be using one of your elite traits, which is running the football. He needs to be more willing to run the football. They need to be more willing to use him as a runner because it works. The last 2 weeks when they're using him as a designed north-south runner, it has helped the run game. It has created explosive plays. It has picked up first downs. They need more from him in that department. They need him to be more aggressive and play like the 2023 Jalen Hurts that was able to win 10 of the first 11 games. So I'm not blaming Jalen, although he's been part of the problem with his inconsistencies. He's not a top 3 issue on this team, but I would have hoped that he could elevate more than he has. And that's a challenge. I want to watch him down this stretch really prove to me, because if he gives up and if he collapses, the rest of the team is a direct extension of their quarterback. I want to see the leader of this football team, the face of the franchise, say, nope, we've been through this before. It's not happening again. I don't want to see that shoulder shrug, stoic face, not saying anything on the sidelines. I want to see the Jalen Hurts from the second half of the Rams game that's passionate, that's emotional, that's cheering on his team, that's yelling, like, let's go, like, let's do this. I want that version of Jalen Hurts that's willing to run and is willing to do anything to win these games down the stretch for his team. And I'm going to be watching Jalen Hurts really closely down the stretch. Another thing the Eagles have to do to make sure this season doesn't unravel, they got to fix the run defense. We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. All right, guys, today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you today by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. You got bowl games, big basketball matchups, the playoff push, of course, in football. It's all happening at once, and while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats, from fantasy scores, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. And the early payout feature is a great bonus. When your lineup starts strong, you may get the option to cash out early. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. All right, guys, wrapping up this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast with Tyler Rowland in the morning, Tony Wiggins in the afternoon. 2 shows a day, Monday through Friday. You can get Locked On NFL wherever you get Locked On Eagles in audio form, and it's always available as well on YouTube as well. If the Eagles are going to make sure they don't collapse, if they're going to beat the Los Angeles Chargers and right the ship at 8-4, the run defense, I think the biggest thing they can fix on the field that needs to be fixed is the run defense. Because again, the offense, it kind of is what it is, right? Are they going to magically turn back into an elite run offense? I don't think so. Is Jalen Hurts in the passing attack going to look like 2022 at some point? I'm not sure. I'm highly doubting that at this point. I still think there can be moments. I think they can make sure they don't collapse, but I don't think they're getting to that ceiling this year. So the biggest thing that they can fix to ensure that they're still at least a top 3 seed in this conference, it's got to be the run defense. Like, they have to fix that. That film against Chicago, and I saw it at the stadium, and it's interesting from, going to football games, it's a little bit more difficult at times to see certain things. It's why I prefer to stay home, especially as an analyst of this team now, not just a fan. But kind of seeing it from like almost an all-22 view, standing a little bit higher up at the link. Tickets are expensive. That's why you got to go through Gametime. But it is good to see things on defense more than offense. And then going back and watching the film this morning, I mean, the gaps that were open for Chicago's run offense, it was unbelievable. Like, the backside, DeAndre Swift makes one cut, and it looked like he had 30 yards of open field almost every single play. Their gap discipline on defense, the Eagles tackling, it was really bad. And the Eagles defense, like, they can't start to bleed now. If they're going to look inconsistent, even though they held Chicago to 10 points, it felt like all game and gave the Eagles offense opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. If they're going to allow like 250 plus rushing yards a game and start to bleed and be inconsistent in one way, then this team I don't think has a shot. So that's the biggest thing that needs to be fixed against the Chargers and moving forward the rest of the year is that run defense. Like Jalen Carter, you cannot get beat as consistently as you did at the line of scrimmage against Chicago. We need more consistency out of, I wasn't just talking about Jalen Hurts, I'm talking about Jalen Carter as well. Like, you are the alpha of the defense. They need more from him. The holes that were open, the defensive tackles were not, Jordan Davis had a pretty good game, but the rest of that defensive line just got absolutely worked. And if a running back got to that second level, the tackling was terrible. I mean, Nakobe Dean had a brutal game. Zach Bonds kind of disappeared, I feel like, over the last few weeks. I haven't really heard his name much, seen any really impact plays from a top 5 paid linebacker in football. Sidney Brown, oh my gosh. The drop-off between Drew Makuba and Sidney Brown is substantial. Like, yeah, you didn't hear Drew Makuba's name called a lot, but Makuba tackled pretty well. He was pretty good in coverage. Like, not hearing a defensive back's name normally is a good thing. That means he's not making a lot of mistakes. Like, yeah, is he making the pop plays of other players? Probably not. But Sidney Brown compared to Makuba, it's night and day. I mean, Sidney Brown, yet again, just does not know how to take the right tackling angles. Flies downhill like a bat out of hell and completely whiffs. There were some times where he just was on an island against a running back one-on-one and didn't even come close to bringing him down. And the coverage, I mean, there should have been like 3 passing touchdowns because of Sidney Brown in coverage, missing his assignment, just running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Luckily, a couple times Caleb Williams underthrew a player in the end zone or just didn't see it. But Sidney Brown is a liability on this defense. So if they're going to get this thing right, that second and first level of the defense, you got to fix the run game, and they got to find a way to hide Sidney Brown or start somebody else there. I don't know, maybe try Michael Carter at that spot. You know, Fangio said he's been impressed with Brown in practice throughout the year, and he feels like he's ready to go. When he watches that tape, I feel like he'll probably reconsider that. And it was only one game. It was only his first start of the season since early on in the year when he was kind of rotating in with Makuba. But man, that drop-off was significant. Like, they need Brown to be so much better. Every issue that we've had with Brown, and the reason we said he might not be a starter, why they drafted Makuba in the second round, why they brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson last year, you kind of saw that on the film against Chicago. So the biggest thing that needs to happen, like, yeah, obviously I mentioned Jalen Hurts playing more consistent football, this team mentally not collapsing, not giving up on the season just because things aren't perfect. This team kind of has a perfectionism problem, a perfect complex. But the biggest thing to me is the run defense. It's got to get fixed. The defense, yeah, it felt like a unit that knew it's all on their shoulders. And without them, if they let anything up, they're going to collapse. And it felt like that pressure finally kind of caved in a little bit. But they can't let that happen moving forward. This team needs to be carried by their defense if they want to win this division, still be potentially a top 2 seed in the conference. So to me, that's like the biggest thing from that Bears game. That's got to get fixed. The defense still, like, props to them. They were opportunistic. That Jalen Hunt pick was unbelievable. They gave this Eagles offense so many chances to take over that game, and the offense was not able to do it. But yeah, I mean, you allow almost 300 yards of offense on the ground. That's going to kill you. Teams are going to be able to have time of possession. They're going to be able to kill a lot of clock, and that's going to hurt this football team. So to me, that's the biggest thing that's got to change, especially against the Chargers team that's Justin Herbert's got a really banged up hand. If he plays, he's going to be limited. If he doesn't play, it's Trey Lance. They're going to run the football. So it's up to that Eagles front seven to get this thing back on track. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.